I didn't scream. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even pack a bag. I just walked out. No goodbyes. No dramatic confrontation. No last-minute pleas for honesty. After 12 years of marriage, the only thing I took was my silence and a heart so worn down it stopped breaking. My name's Carter. I'm not the type to air out dirty laundry online, but if you're reading this, maybe you've been where I was. Or maybe you're standing on the edge of a decision, wondering if walking away makes you weak. Let me be clear, it doesn't. Sometimes, silence is the loudest answer you can give. It started with little shifts. My wife, Dana, used to light up when she saw me walk through the door. Then one day, that light dimmed, and it never came back. I told myself it was work stress, that she just needed space, that we were in a season. But you can only lie to yourself for so long before your own mind turns against you. The moment that shattered everything didn't come with fireworks. It came in the form of a forgotten iPad on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. But the screen lit up with a message preview while I was cooking dinner. Just one line. Last night was risky, but worth it. He has no idea. Face blowing a kiss. My hands froze mid-chop. I stared at that glowing screen, my fingers still covered in basil and garlic. My heart knew what my brain refused to accept. Still, I tapped it open, hoping, praying it was some harmless message to a girlfriend. It wasn't. The thread was long, flirty, explicit, shameless. I scrolled with a numb hand through months of messages between Dana and someone named Mitch. He was bold. He wasn't afraid of me. He even joked about how clueless I must be right under my roof. They talked about hotels, about gifts I paid for without realizing, about how boring I'd become. I didn't throw the iPad. I didn't call her. I didn't even cry. I finished making dinner. I set the table. I poured her wine like I always did. And when she walked in from her extra yoga session, she smiled, pecked my cheek, and said she was starving. I smiled back. I don't know how I managed that. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe it was the part of me that had already died. We ate. We talked. She told me about her busy day. I nodded, listening to a woman who didn't know I had just witnessed the full collapse of the life I thought we shared. That night, when she fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling for hours. And when the sun started to rise, I quietly stood, dressed, and left the keys on the kitchen counter. I didn't leave a note. I just disappeared. And for weeks, maybe even months, I assumed she didn't care. I thought she'd moved on easily. After all, she had someone else, didn't she? But I was wrong because now she's desperate to find me. They say when you vanish, the silence you leave behind eventually starts to scream. And I guess that's exactly what happened in Dana's world. Only I wasn't there to witness the first wave of panic. I didn't need to be. I had already removed myself from the chessboard while she was still playing games in a house that no longer belonged to either of us. When I left that morning, I didn't just disappear. I deleted myself. I used to think you couldn't erase 12 years of shared memories, holidays, laughter, Sunday mornings, and whispered dreams. But I was wrong. You can, and you should, when you discover they were all built on a lie. I didn't go far, not at first. I stayed in the same state but off the grid. I booked an Airbnb under a friend's name, canceled all joint cards, and disconnected my number. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance. I wanted peace. And more than anything, I wanted to stop pretending that I mattered to someone who clearly stopped valuing me long ago. The first time Dana realized I was gone, she didn't panic. I know this because a mutual friend, one of the few I still trusted, told me she just thought I had gone for a drive. That evening, she even posted a story on Instagram, wineglass in hand, captioned, "Self-care night sparkles wineglass #blessed." That hit harder than I expected. I remember sitting on the porch of that cabin, staring at her smiling face on a screen and wondering if I ever meant anything to her at all. But it wasn't until 4 days later that the facade started to crack. She began calling friends. She called my brother. She even called my boss, thinking maybe I'd gone to the office, but I hadn't. I wasn't running. I was just done. She filed a missing person report on day 7. That's when the texts started rolling in. Not from her, but from her mother, from old college friends, even from a neighbor I barely spoke to. The messages ranged from, "Please let someone know you're safe," to "Dana is falling apart." I almost felt guilty. Almost. But guilt doesn't belong to the person who walked away from betrayal. It belongs to the one who committed it. Around day 12, something changed. I got an email from an unknown address. No subject line, just a wall of desperate words. It was Dana. She created a burner account just to get through to me. Her message was full of questions, apologies, and frantic uncertainty. She begged me to respond. Said she couldn't sleep. Said she hadn't spoken to Mitch since the day I vanished. That she made a terrible mistake. That she didn't realize what she had until it was gone. I didn't reply. Why would I? She never once apologized before I found out. She never confessed on her own. She had every chance to come clean. Instead, she smiled in my face, made dinner plans, kissed me goodnight, and secretly made reservations at hotels with another man. Now she was sorry. Now she was broken. Good. But here's the thing people don't understand about walking away. It's not just physical. It's mental, emotional, spiritual. I didn't just walk out of our house. I walked out of the version of myself that needed her validation to feel like a man. And the more time passed, the more I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. I remembered who I was before her. The man with ambition, humor, focus. The man who used to look in the mirror without questioning if he was enough. Dana's betrayal didn't just end our marriage. It ended a version of me that had settled for crumbs while calling it love. Meanwhile, her search intensified. She started posting cryptic messages online, sharing old photos of us with vague captions like, "Some things should never be taken for granted." I even heard through the grapevine that she drove to my parents' house and sat in the driveway, crying for 2 hours. She knocked, but no one answered. They were protecting me. Because what she still doesn't understand is that I didn't vanish out of fear or spite. I left to survive. And even now, as she spirals deeper into regret, I don't feel anger. I feel calm. I feel distance. I feel free. But freedom has a strange echo. And one day soon, that silence might just be broken. Not by me, but by what she discovers next. When Dana stood in the center of our empty living room for the first time, no footsteps echoing from the hallway, no quiet humming from the kitchen, no trace of my scent on the pillows, something in her finally registered. I hadn't just stepped out to clear my head. I hadn't gone to stay at a buddy's place. I hadn't taken time to cool off. I was gone. She didn't realize it yet, but that moment, standing there alone, phone in hand, calling a number that had already been deactivated, was her new beginning. And not the romanticized version she expected when she entertained someone else behind my back. It was the raw, unfiltered version, the kind that hits you like a cold wind at 3 a.m., leaving you to sit with the person you've become when no one else is watching. For weeks after I left, Dana carried on like she still had control. I know that now, not because I was watching her, but because the world we once shared kept whispering updates to me, whether I asked for them or not. Friends, neighbors, old classmates. People I never expected to hear from were suddenly reaching out not to gossip, but because they were shocked. Dana had built our image like a brand. We were the couple that smiled at barbecues, that posted throwback wedding pics with captions like, "Forever isn't long enough." She wore loyalty like a badge in public while handing out her heart behind closed doors. When I disappeared, the cracks in her performance became too wide to ignore. And for the first time, people started putting the pieces together. She tried damage control, claimed I had a breakdown, that I'd always been emotionally distant, that I struggled with mental fatigue. I even heard she mentioned therapy, which is funny considering she always rolled her eyes when I suggested couples counseling back when things first felt off. But the worst lie, the one that made my stomach turn, she told people I abandoned her. Not that I left because she cheated. Not that I vanished because she broke our marriage into pieces and didn't even notice. No, according to her, I just walked out for no reason. Typical. But the thing about lies is they only work if no one knows the truth. And unfortunately for her, someone else did. Not long after I left, a guy named Tyler reached out to one of my closest friends. Tyler worked at the same gym where Dana's friend Mitch trained clients. Apparently, he'd seen them together more than once. Not just flirting. Full-on kissing in the back parking lot, touching, whispering, laughing like high school sweethearts. Dana was never careful. She didn't think she had to be. Tyler wasn't even close to me, but he knew my face. And when he found out I was gone and that Dana was painting herself as the victim, something in him clicked. He came forward quietly. No drama, just facts. He even sent a time-stamped video he'd caught on the building's outdoor camera, thinking it might be important someday. It was, because that footage became the line between her version of the story and the truth. Meanwhile, I started to rebuild slowly. I moved out of state. Nothing flashy, just a small rented house with creaky floors and quiet neighbors. I got a job at a local landscaping company. Nothing like my old corporate life, but it felt good. It was real. Every morning, I woke up sore but clear-headed. And every night, I went to bed without feeling like I was sharing space with a stranger. The first real sign that Dana had finally unraveled came in the form of a handwritten letter mailed to my brother's house, addressed to me. She didn't know where I was, so she was grasping at straws. The envelope was thin, no return address. Inside, 3 pages of regret. The tone wasn't angry, it was desperate. She wrote about our wedding, about the first apartment we had with the leaky ceiling and the loud neighbors, about our trip to Denver when I held her in a thunderstorm because she was afraid of the lightning. She wrote about the little things, how I made her coffee every morning, even when I was running late, how I rubbed her back when she was too anxious to sleep, how I always let her have the last cookie. But then came the shift. She wrote that she lost herself, that she didn't recognize the person she became, that Mitch meant nothing long-term, that it was escape, not love. She said she never expected me to leave. She thought I'd yell, maybe cry, maybe even threaten to leave, but not actually vanish. She never imagined I'd be strong enough to walk away without a single word. That was her biggest mistake. Her final paragraph said, "Please, if there's any way back to you, I'll wait. I'll do anything." I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer, not out of sentiment, but because one day, I may need to remind myself just how far I've come. She was still unraveling. But me, I was just getting started. It wasn't a matter of if, just when. I always knew Dana would eventually start tracing the edges of my new life. People like her don't understand silence. Terrifies them. They fill it with stories, assumptions, versions of events that let them sleep at night. But when all their narratives start to collapse, they go looking for the only thing they've never had to face before: the truth. By the time Dana tracked down the town I'd moved to, the seasons had already changed. The leaves were falling in slow motion where I lived now. Mornings came with fog and distant train whistles. And nobody asked you where you came from, just whether you wanted sugar in your coffee. It was peaceful, understated, and real. It was everything she wasn't. She showed up unannounced at a hardware store where I'd gone a few times when I was fixing up a broken fence behind my rental. Apparently, she called every shop in a 50-mile radius, pretending to be my worried wife. Told them I had memory issues and might not know who I am. That part almost made me laugh when I heard it later. She was rewriting reality again. Classic Dana. The woman who couldn't admit to cheating was now telling strangers I had a mental condition to justify my absence. But here's where it gets interesting. She didn't find me. She found someone who had met me. The guy behind the counter, Jerry, is ex-military. A quiet man with a straightforward way of speaking. He didn't owe me anything, and we weren't close, but I'd helped him lift some lumber one day, and we shared a few beers afterward. When Dana described me, he paused, then asked her straight out, "You his wife?" She blinked, hesitated, then nodded with a soft, practiced sadness, like she was the widow of a man who didn't know he'd died. Jerry didn't buy it. He told her I was doing fine, that I'd found a rhythm out here, that I didn't seem like a guy who forgot who he was. He didn't tell her where I lived, didn't hand over any numbers, just said if he wanted to be found, he wouldn't be lost. She left the store pale and shaking. That same evening, I got a voicemail from Jerry. He didn't say much, just told me what happened and ended with, You got a storm lookin' for you, brother. Thought you should know. I stood outside when I listened to it, watching the last of the sunset stretch across the sky like a deep breath. The kind of sky Dana never looked at unless she could post it. I didn't feel panic. I felt detached. There was a time when I would have been terrified to see her again. But that man she once knew, the man who stayed loyal while being emotionally starved, who thought a quiet night on the couch was enough, who believed in vows more than she did, he was gone. And here's the part that will haunt her the most. She didn't just lose her husband. She lost access to the version of herself she could control through me. That's what she truly mourned. Not love, not partnership, but her illusion of superiority. That control is what made her feel powerful. And now it was gone. Dana started showing up around town more often. She'd bump into people who knew me only vaguely at diners, libraries, even gas stations. Always with the same fragile smile and wounded eyes. She wasn't just looking for a person anymore. She was chasing a ghost, a version of her life that no longer existed. Every time she reached for the past, she found dust. I didn't tell anyone to lie for me. I never asked for help. But people protect those who live honestly. And I had finally started doing that for the first time in years. What she didn't realize, what she still doesn't understand even now, is that I wasn't hiding. I was healing. My days were filled with simple routines now. Early morning walks before sunrise, volunteering at a small community garden, reading again, writing in a notebook, reclaiming my time, my voice, my breath. Things I didn't know I was allowed to miss when I was still living in her orbit. And then came the final shift, the moment that cemented that I could never go back, even if I wanted to. I met someone. Not romantically, not yet, but she was kind, present, a single mother who worked 2 jobs and still found time to laugh. We met at the local farmer's market, reaching for the same bag of oranges. I apologized. She made a joke, and we ended up having coffee. Nothing forced, no expectations, just 2 strangers having an honest conversation. She didn't know my history, and I didn't volunteer it. But I told her the truth about where I was in broad strokes. That I'd been in a place where I lost myself and now I was learning how to exist again. She said, "Sounds like you're not lost at all. Sounds like you've just been quiet long enough to hear yourself." That stuck with me. Dana, meanwhile, kept searching. She sent another letter. This one thicker. Pictures of us from back then. Movie ticket stubs. A pressed flower from our anniversary dinner 7 years ago. A drawing I once made on a napkin of the way she looked when she laughed too hard at a bad joke. But it all felt like a museum exhibit. Nostalgia curated to make her feel like something still lived inside it. Didn't. That life was over. And soon she would have no choice but to face it because I wasn't just gone. I was building something new, and it no longer included her name. I didn't expect her to show up in person. Not really. You tell yourself it's a possibility. Sure, when someone loses control of the story they've been spinning for years, they panic. They claw. They throw dignity out the window just to feel like they're still in the game. But even knowing all that, even hearing she'd been sniffing around town for weeks, I still didn't expect her to find my street. And yet, there she was. It was a Wednesday. I had just gotten back from work. Dirt under my fingernails. Paint splatter on my forearm from restoring an old barn for a neighbor who paid in fresh eggs and stories. I parked in the gravel, turned the engine off, opened the truck door, and froze. Dana was standing at the end of the driveway like something out of a dream you don't want to admit you still have. Same hair, different tone. Softer makeup. Casual clothes meant to say, "I'm changed, but not too changed." She wasn't holding anything. No bag, no phone, just her, alone. She didn't wave, didn't speak. Neither did I. We just stared. The silence between us was so thick it felt like it might split the air in two. Eventually, I walked past her and opened the gate. She turned slowly as I did. "Carter," she said. Her voice hadn't changed. That startled me more than anything. I'd imagined it differently in my head. Strained, cracked, foreign. But it was exactly the same as the last time I heard it, just slower now, less confident. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she added. I didn't answer. I didn't owe her dialogue. She followed me into the yard without being asked. The audacity of it almost made me laugh, but I didn't. I just stood still, waiting. She looked around like she was walking through someone else's memory. Maybe she was. "This is where you've been?" she asked. "All this time." Still no answer. She shifted awkwardly, rubbing her arms. "I didn't expect it to be like this." I raised an eyebrow, finally breaking the silence. "Like what?" She paused. "Simple. Quiet. You never wanted quiet. You liked the city. You hated small towns." "No," I said, folding my arms. "You hated small towns. You hated being somewhere no one was watching you." Her face twisted just a little, a micro-expression barely there, but I saw it. That flicker of the old Dana. The one who needed an audience to feel whole. The one who kept up appearances until the lights went off and she could slip away to her secret life. "I made a mistake," she said. "I've said that in every letter." "You made a choice," I corrected. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. What you did was a pattern." She exhaled like she'd been holding something in for a year. "I was scared," she whispered. "Of what? Of loving someone who stayed? Of a life that wasn't about chaos? No. I was scared I'd disappear, that I'd lose who I was." I tilted my head. "So you lost me instead." She flinched. I watched the impact land in her eyes. That moment, the realization she could no longer spin this into something she could fix. The way her hands trembled just slightly, like they didn't know where they belonged anymore. "I came to ask one thing," she said, her voice breaking for the first time. I waited. "Can we talk? Just 1 hour. One dinner. One chance to speak without this wall between us." I almost felt bad. Almost. But it wasn't about anger anymore. It was about clarity, peace, boundaries. And I had learned that walking away doesn't mean punishing someone. It means protecting yourself from what broke you. So I answered calmly, "Dana, there is no wall. There's just space. Space I built with silence. Space that healed me." "I miss you," she said, stepping forward. "You miss the version of me who didn't know the truth," I replied. "The man who stayed while you slipped out to feel alive with someone else." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't move. I didn't console her. She wasn't mine to protect anymore. That job had ended the day I saw who she really was. She looked down. "I don't know how to fix this." "You don't?" I said simply. "Because it's not broken anymore. It's just over." She stood there a long time after that. Said nothing, did nothing. I don't know if she thought I'd change my mind or if she was just stalling, hoping something inside me would crumble. But eventually, she turned, walked back to her car. And this time, I didn't watch her drive away, because I wasn't watching the past anymore. I was living in something new now, something quiet, something real. And that day, the day she stood in my yard, reaching out to a ghost, was the last time she ever tried to find me. It wasn't Dana that shifted my world next. It wasn't anyone from my old life either. The next twist didn't arrive in the form of desperation or regret. Came in the shape of a question I hadn't expected. One that made me sit down on my porch steps and stare at the mountains in silence for a long time. The question was, "Can you help me with something real?" Came from her. Emery, the woman I met at the market. The one with the dark, tired eyes and the laugh that broke like sunlight through clouds. The one who never asked about my past. Who didn't flinch when I paused too long in the middle of a sentence or lost my train of thought because I drifted into memories I was still learning how to let go of. She never looked at me like I was broken. She just saw me exactly as I was. And that alone made her different. Emery was a single mom, yes, but that label barely scratched the surface. She was everything Dana never understood. Messy, brave, honest. She didn't fake perfection. She didn't curate her life into neat little photo captions. She showed up to coffee dates with a stain on her shirt and a story about how her 6-year-old poured syrup on the dog that morning. She laughed at her own chaos, but there was strength behind it. Quiet, steady strength, the kind I didn't realize I needed to be around. The day she asked me for help, she didn't explain it like it was a big deal. She just said, "I've got this old greenhouse on my property. It's falling apart. I can't afford a contractor and I don't want it to rot. I thought of you. Then she looked down, shrugged, and added, but no pressure. Just thought I'd ask. She said it like she was offering me a favor, not the other way around. Like she was giving me the chance to be useful in a world that had labeled me as disappeared. I said yes. That weekend, I drove up to her place. Nothing grand. A simple two-bedroom tucked behind a narrow dirt road that curved like a question mark. Her son, Levi, was out back with a soccer ball, kicking it between a crooked fence and an old tree stump. He waved at me like we'd been friends for years. No suspicion, no hesitation. The greenhouse wasn't salvageable, not really, but I didn't tell her that. I told her we could fix it, and we did. Over the next several weekends, we tore off rotted beams, replaced glass panels, re-leveled the foundation. We worked until our hands were blistered and our backs ached. And slowly, without either of us saying it out loud, the spaces between those hours began to fill with something more than just dust and sweat. One night, after we finished putting in a new door frame, we sat on the grass and drank lemonade like kids. She leaned back, stared at the stars, and said, I think I used to believe life had to hurt to be real. I don't know where that came from, but now, I'm starting to think maybe peace is allowed too. I didn't say anything because I knew exactly what she meant. The strange part was, I hadn't noticed how much I'd healed until I saw myself in her eyes. Not as a man who'd been betrayed, but as a man who'd survived, who'd rebuilt, who was still rebuilding. And then something happened I wasn't ready for. Dana came back again. Only this time, she didn't knock on my door. She called Emery. I don't know how she found her number. Maybe through a mutual acquaintance. Maybe she had someone follow me. I'll never know. And honestly, I no longer care. All I know is that Emery told me about the call with this look in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not fear, not confusion, something closer to protection. She said she was your wife. Emery told me that night, gently. She asked me if I was the reason you disappeared. Said she deserved to know who I was. My jaw clenched, but I didn't speak. She said she still loved you, Emery added, her voice softer now. Said you were punishing her by being here, that you were acting like she was a monster. I just stared at the floor. She didn't sound evil, Carter, Emery said. She sounded lost, but also entitled, like you owed her something. I looked up then. I don't. I know, Emery nodded. But she doesn't. That was the moment I realized something crucial. Dana wasn't hunting for love. She wasn't trying to repair what she broke. She was fighting for her old reflection, the one she could manipulate and spin into a story where she still looked like the heroine. She wasn't trying to find me. She was trying to erase the consequences of who she became. And that wasn't my responsibility. I told Emery everything that night. The iPad, the messages, the night I made dinner for a woman I knew had just left another man's bed. The letters, the driveway confrontation, every jagged edge of it. I let it all out. Not because I needed her to feel sorry for me, but because I finally wanted someone to know without having to hide. When I finished, she didn't try to fix me. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she looked at me and said, You don't owe her closure. Sometimes, closure is what people ask for when they're trying to reopen a door that should stay shut. That night, I finally deleted Dana's letters. Every last one. And I slept deeper than I had in over a year. It happened on a Saturday. The kind of Saturday where everyone in town seemed to be out for some reason. Yard sales on every corner, music drifting out from the local bakery, kids running barefoot between fences, and the air heavy with barbecue smoke and fresh-cut grass. I wasn't planning to do anything special. Emery had taken Levi to see her sister, and I was picking up some lumber and compost from the community lot near the church, same as I did every couple of weeks. I wasn't expecting anything unusual, but life, especially the new one you try to build from scratch, has a way of testing its own foundation just when you start to feel safe walking on it. She was there. Dana. I didn't see her at first. Not when I pulled in, not when I loaded up the truck bed, but when I turned around to head back toward the registration tent. There she stood, standing right between the line of vendor tables and a group of women selling homemade preserves. I knew she didn't belong before I recognized her. She was dressed too carefully, holding her posture like she was being photographed. And the second our eyes locked, I knew exactly what she was doing. She hadn't come to talk. She'd come to make a scene. People were already watching. It was a small town and outsiders stood out. But when she took a few quick steps toward me, like she was afraid I'd vanish again if she hesitated, the energy shifted. I felt the entire place quiet by a fraction. A few faces turned. A couple of vendors slowed what they were doing. "Carter," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Please, can we just talk?" I stood still, not frozen, just unmoved. "I don't want to do this here," I said calmly. "I didn't know where else to find you," she said, voice cracking, eyes already glassy. "You don't answer. You don't respond. I wrote to you. I waited." She looked thinner, exhausted almost, but I didn't let that fool me. Exhaustion isn't the same as remorse. One is about discomfort. The other is about accountability. I wasn't seeing a woman who came to make peace. I was seeing someone who had finally realized she no longer controlled the version of herself other people believed in. She wasn't trying to win me back. She was trying to reclaim her narrative. And she was doing it in the one place I still had peace. "I'm not doing this here," I repeated slower. People were watching more openly now. Some recognized me. A few had worked with me on small community projects. Others had probably bought plants or soil I'd helped transport. They weren't strangers to me anymore, and they weren't hers to perform for. But Dana wasn't backing down. "I'm begging you," she said, now fully crying. "I made mistakes. I destroyed everything. I know that. But don't treat me like a stranger." "You are a stranger," I said. "You made sure of that." That hit her. She looked down, her shoulders trembling. And for a second, I wondered if she would finally stop. But then came the worst part. The part that told me nothing had really changed. "I saw the woman," she said, looking up again. "The one you're with now. The one you're playing house with. She doesn't know you like I do." I felt the air shift. One of the volunteers, an older woman named Joyce who ran the local senior garden project, stepped forward slightly. She knew Emery. Everyone in town did. She looked between me and Dana with a quiet frown, not saying a word, but saying everything. I turned toward Dana, this time, not with frustration or pity, just with resolve. "You don't get to come into this town and insult someone you've never met," I said evenly. "You don't get to show up a year too late and pretend that this is still about love. It's about control. It always has been. And the only reason you're falling apart now is because I stopped giving it to you." She stood there, stunned. Her lips parted, but no words came out. "This life isn't yours to walk into," I continued. "You gave it away. Every day you lied. Every moment you smiled at me while thinking about someone else, you pushed this life further and further away. And now that it's real, you can't stand that it's not about you anymore." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Everyone heard it. And more importantly, so did she. There was no applause, no gasps, just silence. And then something I didn't expect. Dana slowly turned, walked back toward the vendor tables, and left. No outburst, no begging, just gone. Maybe for the first time, she finally realized the show was over. The audience wasn't clapping. The character she was trying to play didn't exist anymore. And the man she thought she could pull back into her orbit had already stepped out of the frame. I stood there for a while, letting the tension settle. Joyce eventually walked over and placed a hand on my arm. "You handled that with grace," she said. "Some people never learn until the mirror stops flattering them." I nodded, not speaking. Later that day, I got a text from Emery. She didn't mention the scene. She just said, "Hope your Saturday was calm. Levi wants to show you his new drawing when you come by." I smiled because it was finally real. Dana had tried one last time to resurrect the version of life she thought she could control. But life had already moved on. And now, for the first time in years, I had too. It's strange how you can spend years chasing answers from someone who broke you, thinking that healing can't begin until they explain everything. And then one day you wake up and realize you don't care anymore. That's how peace arrives. Not like a storm or a fire, but like a sunrise through half-closed blinds. Gradual, quiet, soft. After the scene at the market, Dana never reached out again. No more letters. No more unexpected phone calls. No mysterious voicemails. Nothing. And for once, her silence wasn't a manipulation tactic. It was real. She'd finally heard what I'd been saying all along without ever raising my voice. I'm done. Not because I hate you, but because I love myself too much to go back. Weeks passed, then months. The town fell back into its rhythm. Sunday cookouts, farmers' markets, the steady cycle of seasons shifting across the hills. My hands stayed busy. My mind stayed light. And somewhere in that stretch of normalcy, something happened that marked the real end of one story and the quiet beginning of another. Emery invited me to Levi's school art fair. It was nothing fancy, just construction paper projects pinned to walls and parents carrying juice boxes and tote bags. But as I stood next to her, watching Levi proudly explain how his rocket house was going to go to Mars, I felt something shift inside me. Not regret, not memory. Home. Not the kind you leave behind when someone betrays you. The kind you grow into when you finally plant yourself somewhere real. Emery looked over at me, smiling with that natural calm she always carried. And without a single word spoken, I knew she understood that I wasn't just standing next to her. I was finally here. Later that night, as the stars came out and Levi was asleep in the next room, she handed me a photo, a candid one. Me and Levi kneeling in the dirt next to the greenhouse we'd finished together. I was laughing at something, hands dirty, squinting in the sun. You look different in this, she said. I nodded. I feel different. We didn't talk about Dana anymore. There was no need. She was a chapter that had been read, understood, and closed. She wasn't the enemy. She was just a lesson I was no longer obligated to carry. It's easy to confuse closure with confrontation. To think you need to slam a door shut to feel like you've walked away. But real closure isn't loud. It's when you stop looking back. When their name no longer triggers an ache. When their voice in your head finally quiets and your own voice rises above it. That's what I'd found. I rebuilt everything from the inside out. I created a space that wasn't about forgetting the past, but living beyond it. I found a woman who valued presence over performance. I found work that gave me purpose. I found mornings worth waking up for. I found me. So, if you're reading this because you're where I once was, staring down at the truth of someone's betrayal, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, let me tell you something no one said to me at the time. You will. Not right away. Not without grief. Not without hard, lonely days. But if you walk away, not in anger, but in truth, something better will meet you down the road. Something real. I walked away from a woman who looked me in the eyes and lied. Now I wake up next to honesty every single day, and I wouldn't trade that peace for anything in the world.